So, Kevin, I've started to tip my toe into the draft waters, and I've, started with receiver because I do think the Patriots have some interest in getting somebody. And we talked about they don't have any receivers signed by 2023. Yep. And, you would love to have a guy that you can bring in with Mac Jones and sort of pair him with him. I wanted to ask you because I was listening to Chris Sims's podcast the other day, and he had his top 5. He's often unorthodox, but I think he's pretty good at what he does, and he knows what he's looking at in terms of talent. I found it very interesting, and I wanted to get your reaction, that Chris Olave is sort of like a, borderline top 5 type of guy in terms of at the receiver position. But he didn't have Garrett Wilson on his top 5. I think Jameson Williams from Alabama was by far his number 1. Of course, he's coming off the ACL. But I know or at least in your mock drafts, you've had Garrett Wilson going high. Just sort of I wanted to get your quickie thoughts on that. And he likes Drake London was in his top 5. I don't think he's the biggest fan of Drake London, but he had a couple other guys that surprised me. Like Watson from North Dakota. He's also high on Burks. I saw Burks at the combine. I was in his workout. I was not impressed by Treylon Burks. He did not stand out to me. So.
Yeah, so I'm going to disagree with Chris a little bit, right? So I think that Garrett Wilson, for me, he's a 3-level threat. So he's quick on short routes. He needs some route running refinement, but I think he can be a good route runner, which is going to help as intermediate. And he's got plenty of speed. So in good body control, elite ability to separate. So when he catches the football, like we talk about Jameson Williams, who is an absolute, not only does Jameson Williams have great speed, but he has great burst, which creates like that lethal combination, right? Mm-hmm. Garrett Wilson has a great burst as well. And keep in mind, Garrett Wilson started over Jameson Williams at Ohio State previously. So,
Wait, hang on. Let's also point out, just for the sake of balance here, that who was the kid who just died? The quarterback from Ohio State. Dwayne Haskins started over Joe Burrows, and he had to transfer to LSU. So let's just point that out, that maybe Urban Meyer and his cats don't exactly do the best evaluations.
Fair. I think that the comparison I use to Garrett Wilson is Santonio Holmes. And the comparison I use for Jameson Williams is slightly bigger Deshaun Jackson. Right. And so both those guys could certainly help the Patriots. I have nothing certainly against Jameson Williams. I think his talent's obvious. I also like Jahan Dotson from Penn State. I would put him in the top 5, especially for what the Patriots try to do. Drake London, I like. I mean, he's a possession guy. Allen Robinson, I think at his ceiling, maybe a Brandon LaFell at his floor. So you got to figure out how he runs. I think he has his pro day coming up. I'm a little lower on Treylon Burks than maybe most people. I wouldn't
agree with you
as a first rounder. I think the ideally people say, well, he's Deebo Samuel. Well, he might be Laviska Shenault from the Jags, and he might not even be that good. I think at that next level. I think how he translates to the next level, I think, is difficult. Arkansas spent a lot of time getting him the football in positions where he could use his athleticism. He's a big kid. He's a very likable kid. I think he's going to interview well and all of that, but he's not like the burner that people are going to think. He's got some good acceleration and he's a good player, but I don't think he's a first rounder. I wouldn't be thrilled if the Pats went with him in the first round. And I'm not as high on Olave as some other people. I think Olave is a good wide receiver number 2. And if they pick Olave, you just got to be comfortable with him being a wide receiver number 2, which is all right if that's how you evaluate it. I think if they're going wide receiver round 1, you're hopefully drafting a wide receiver 1, right? And I think that's just how I evaluate it.
Don't do another N'Keal Harry thing. Was like, all right, he's a tweener. Like, at his best, he's probably a number 1,
Yep. And look what the Bengals did last year with Chase is he's an all pro talent, right? But then you see, Tyreek Hill, obviously he had issues, but he wasn't going to be a top of the draft guy, right? And then you look on the other side, you got Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. Those guys, Robert obviously was out for the Super Bowl, and the Rams didn't draft Beckham, but those, Cooper Kupp was a third rounder. Deebo Samuel was a second rounder. Even Devontae Adams, those guys are second rounders. So those guys can be had later in the draft. And if you're picking a guy wide receiver one in the draft, or draft one, the first round, I think you gotta look at them as a wide receiver one.
Let's talk for a guy who, I heard Sims talk about him. I've texted some people around the league, and there seems to be some excitement about him. You saw him in person at the Senior Bowl. Christian Watson from North Dakota, big kid, I hear he's great on 50-50 balls, can also get explosion after the catch as well. What did I'm a big believer in sort of the eye test and do they pop? And, what do you think of Watson? What did you see out of him at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, I wrote this after the Senior Bowl. He passes the eye test, and that's the big thing for him going down to Mobile is how does he match up against other players that are going to play in the league? And for my money, he was the best player in Mobile, best wide receiver in Mobile. I put him in the mock draft, the second mock draft we had at the end of round one. So, I think there are some commentators that said, you're crazy. Watson's never going to go that high. I think he could. He's 6'4", almost 210, and he runs under a 4.4. Like that's kind of rare attributes. And he looked good running other routes than just the deep ball, right? That's the thing with sometimes you get people with those traits, but they can just run certain deep routes. And he did a good job, I thought, with his routes and being consistent all week.
When we get into other guys, beyond round one, one guy who's popular right now because the Patriots just had him as a top 30 visit, who at BSJ, you called him almost too obvious a pick for the Patriots. And I kind of agree with you. John Metchi from Alabama. First of all, when did he get the ACL? Like, when did he sustain the injury? Any idea on sort of the timetable on him? And, I agree with you. I think if the Patriots take a receiver, it's going to be Metchi somewhat earlier. Where do you think they're going to need to get him? That sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think Metchi will be available at 54. I think there's actually a chance that Metchi falls into the 75 range and is available there. You're getting a little risky when you get around that range, but he'll be there 50 to 75, and so they have the 54th pick in the second round. So Metchi, I think, will be available for them. One of the things I loved about
Kevin, real quick. I mean, that's like knowing the Patriots, and if they are targeting saying like a Metchi like guy, that's another reason why you trade down. Like you trade down from 21, which is probably borderline where people have first round evaluations on guys. You trade down, you pick up another pick, and then you're like, all right, because I'm a big proponent of, and I think Jimmy Johnson told this to, I don't know if it was Nick Saban or Bill Belichick or maybe both of them, but Jimmy Johnson used to say, hey, this is what you should do. You should, first of all, accumulate a bunch of picks and then write down on the piece of paper the players you have to have in this draft, and then sort of use your picks and manipulate the draft that way. And if I'm the Patriots and I'm saying like I want a Metchi and maybe we can get a tackle at the end of the first, and then with the other picks, trading up for a Metchi, keeping it open and making sure you get that guy because he does have a relationship with Mac Jones. Jameson Williams does not, even though, let me just add, because I don't really think we're going to talk about him, because I don't think they have a shot in hell at Jameson Williams. Even him coming off the ACL in the national championship game, he probably won't play much at all this year, maybe towards the end of the year. But to me, he's at the most, he's going 15th or, somewhere in that range. He's not getting by 15. He might be a top 10 pick. I would not be surprised if somebody takes him in the top 10. He's that good. But I think that Metchi is a guy that if you wanted to link up Mac Jones with a guy for the next 5 years, 10 years, it would be Metchi. And I think that that's being able to manipulate the draft that way. That's Bill Belichick sort of getting back to who he's been and when they've been at their best.
I 100% agree with that. One of the knocks on the mock draft that I had that I would actually agree with is I didn't have a wide receiver. Right. And that's just how the board played out when I was making those picks. They won't let that happen to them. That's where they'll leverage the picks to go up. And if they see somebody that they like, they'll go get them or move back to get capital and then use that capital. One of the things I liked about Metchi is talking to Roger McCreary at the Senior Bowl, who's the cornerback from Auburn, who I also like. And I asked him, who's the best player that you faced this year? And he said, John Metchi. He was a competitor. He's a dog out there. And we just went at each other's throat. And I said a lot of respect. And of course that's playing at a high level of competition. And he played against Jameson Williams, right? That he was on the other side of the field. So I like Metchi. He's a good, solid player. He could be challenged with some, physical corners given his size, but he's very competitive, great work ethic. I think he's a good pick. The other kind of slot guys that I like, I start to get into, Wendell Robinson from Kentucky. He's got a little bit of Percy Harvin to him, I think. And they'd have to, use him as a weapon. Not the biggest cat, but, he broke over 20 tackles last year, over 100 catches. He's a really good player. Kyle Phillips is kind of another obvious pick. I was hoping he was flying under the radar a little bit more than I think he probably will end up getting picked. He was really dominating.
Kelly connection.
Yeah, and he's got he dominated at the Shrine Bowl. I don't even think he played in the game, but the word out of the practices was he was just dominating. Good footwork, good after the catch, first team all Pac-12, can return punts. He fits a lot of boxes that they like to check at that slot position. Not the fastest guy, right? But they don't need the fastest guy at that slot role. They need a guy that can get open. And I think he allows them to do that. And then there's, some other guys like Khalil Shaker, Dontario Drummond, players like that I also like. Khalil should hopefully be available in round 4. He's a guy that I'm sure that they're doing a deep dive on.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, I'm hoping that it comes to an end here, Kevin, but I've been saying for 2 years, the draft is deep with receivers and the Patriots don't come out with anybody. But you just look at these guys, whether it's, Metchi or Sky Moore or Wandale Robinson or Shaker or Kyle Phillips. And then, you even have a guy like, Bo Melton from Rutgers, George Pickens from Georgia, sort of an iffy guy, but, we know how Bill feels about Georgia guys. And if he gets the word from Kirby Smart, there are guys just all over this draft. Undrafted guys, not Slade Bolden. I am not, he ends up here as an undrafted free agent, but I was in his workout at the combine. I did not think anything of him. He did not hold his own, but it's just, this draft is just littered with Patriots type of receivers, guys who you think have a chance to really pop here and could really boost the athletic, quotient on this offense, down the road, especially with, like we said, no receiver signed past 2023. This would be a perfect year for them to double dip at receiver sort of in the middle rounds where you can get 2 different types of receivers and develop them with Mac Jones. I almost want to start weeping because it's just dude, Bill, just take 2 of these guys and give them to Mac and let's see how they grow. The Brady days are over where Brady, would give the guy the stink eye and you never hear from him again. Mac is a different dude. He's going to work with these guys tirelessly to bring them along, even if they're struggling. They have to get 1 or 2 guys out of this draft, don't they, Kevin?
I think so. I think they'll get probably 1 in the draft, and then you're going to see them target some guys undrafted. You referenced Sky Moore. The comp for him, in my mind, is Golden Tate. Really good
Great comp.
Yeah, I think he broke more tackles last year than any wide receiver, and the kid's like 5'9", so he plays really strong, just like Golden did. And the deeper wide receiver or deep threat wide receiver that could develop that I like on day three. You referenced Bo Melton from Rutgers. I do like Bo. I also like Danny Gray from SMU. And he's a guy I think that people should keep an eye on. My binky, there's 3 or 4 guys that I really like for them, as a priority free agent. As you know, I referenced him before the Rose Bowl. Britton Covey he's like a Patriots wide receiver that they absolutely will. Hopefully he agrees to sign, but he had over 2,000 career return yards, was 5-time all Pac-12. His problem is he's 5'8", 170. He's smaller than me, right? And me walking out on an NFL field, hopefully I survive a hit, right? And so I think that Britton is he had a lot of
returns kicks too. Right? He'd be like a perfect gunner replacement.
I think that's exactly right. That's what I was just going to go with. He replaces Gunner if they don't replace anybody else with the draft that has that return experience. When I watched him, I just kept thinking that's Braxton Barrios.